Welcome to Madlit Musings, the podcast where you get to eavesdrop on your favorite authors without getting caught. I've been stoked to have authors like Angela Hunt, Bill Myers, Nicole Deese, Tessa Afshar, comedian Bob Smiley, and more on the show, and this year I have another great lineup of storytellers and truth-sayers. If you love to eavesdrop at coffee shops like I do, this is the podcast for you. It's where we get real, we get tough, we laugh, and we might even cry. It's where we meet authors on a different level, where every story and podcast episode has its own heartbeat. So hang out with me today. I'm Jaime Jill Wright, your host at Madlit Musings. This is your podcast for real chats with real authors about real life. Hey everyone, it is Jaime Jill Wright here at Madlit Musings, and today I am happy to introduce you all to author Dan Walsh. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. I have read some of your books. I have seen you around the book stratosphere for years. So now you finally get to come on the podcast and we finally get to meet because we've never met before. So this is cool.
Yeah, I just started doing podcasts in the new year. I've been kind of a little behind the eight ball as far as, staying up with technology stuff. My son really was pushing me, Dad, you need to be doing podcasts. So I'm really happy to do it because, it gets you out of the cave a little bit more and getting with people. So I enjoy that.
Right. It forces us writers who prefer to just stay quiet in our little offices to actually get out and have conversations with people. Oh, that's fun. So tell us a little bit about you so we can get to know who Dan Walsh is before we dive into some of your books and your most recent title.
Okay. Let's see. I've been writing full-time since 2010, so 15 years. Prior to that, I was a pastor for 25 years full-time. And it's not like I'm also married. We're celebrating our 49th year. Got married when I was 19, right out of high school.
Ooh.
And one more year for the big 50. I'm actually 50. This next month, I'm going to my 50th high school reunion. So that's making me feel old. Everything that I'm doing, I'm having flashbacks to my senior year in high school because everything's the 50th year of this or that, and all these people on Facebook that we're all getting ready to connect with each other. And I'm looking at their pictures and I'm sure I don't look like anything like I used to look like, but I'm like, who are these people? Other than a handful. It feels like it's going to be a room full of strangers, like a bunch of old people getting together and having a chat, but still looking forward to it. But anyways, as far as my writing, I actually wanted to be a writer way back in 11th grade. And if you asked me in high school, what did I think I was going to do with my life? That's what I thought. I thought my goal would be to be writing novels. And there's a story behind that. But what wound up happening in my senior year, I had a radical conversion to Christ. Prior to that, I was just basically a hardy surfer, long-haired surfer bum. With no real, interest at all in writing. I mean, I don't think even in terms of, giving out cards, it wasn't like, oh yeah, we could really tell you were a good writer the way you wrote cards. I just loved Dan. It wasn't like I had any idea that I could write or would love to write. I took a class in 11th grade called creative writing. It just lit something up in me, and I loved it. And everything I turned in, she gave me like A++. And even read stuff that I wrote out loud to the class. Before the class was over for the summer, she pulled me aside and kind of said, you might be the most naturally gifted writer I've ever taught. And you could really be a writer if you put your mind and work hard at it. So that really influenced me. And that's kind of, again, what I thought I was going to do. And then I said, next year I got saved. And it seemed like what I really wanted more than anything was to know God, know the Bible. I experienced what people call call to ministry just after I got married. And by the age of 28, I became a pastor. Started being full-time for 25 years as a pastor. And pretty much put aside all the writing, other than writing sermon notes.
It's a different type of writing. Definitely.
Probably turning out 5,000-6,000 page, outlines every week from things I was preaching and teaching. But fiction was just, I still read fiction all the time, just for hobby. And I never lost my love of it, and thought maybe when I retire someday, the Lord will let me do that, because I really thought I was supposed to do that. And what ended up happening at year 22, I started burning out as a pastor. And we got some advice that you really need to find something to do that refreshes you, that relaxes you. And my wife reminded me on the way home, when we met, how much I used to love to write in high school. Maybe I should do that. Like Churchill paints, he painted to help relax. So I wasn't thinking anything would come of it. But it happened to be around Christmas time, and I got this idea for what became my first novel, The Unfinished Gift. And I started writing it in my spare time. My kids were a little older now, so I wasn't like stealing time away from them. My wife was really supportive. So about 8 months later, I had this Christmas novel written. She loved it. I would read through the chapters every day, and she was just like, "This is amazing. You really should." And then I, shared it with some people in the church who read fiction all the time, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, this is great." But back then, there was no indie, there was no self-publishing, there was no Amazon. It's not that long ago, 2008. It was really the old-fashioned.
No, it's not.
You either found an agent that took you, or you kept trying, because there's no chance to get books in the bookstore. So and everything else I read also said, expect lots and lots and lots of rejection, so don't get your hopes up. So I put together the package and sent off to 3 top agents that I researched, and got one rejection letter back in like 2 weeks. Surprisingly, the other 2 both got back to me fairly quickly and said, "I love what you sent. I want to read the whole book. Send me the whole book." I wound up signing with one of them, and she had a contract with a major publisher 5 weeks later. And then there I was.
Wow.
It was, of course, for me, it was all introduction. I had no awareness of the publishing world before that. I'm like, and next thing I didn't even know these were, the people I was with were kind of like the A-listers. I was just like happy to be published, and amazed that I didn't have a drawer full of rejection letters. And it wound up doing so well. It won the Carroll Award for Best Debut Author and Best Historical Novel that year. And there I am a year later with a hardback book with my name on it. My wife taking my picture at Barnes and Noble. And so anyway, it's kind of like, I feel like, okay, now I can die a happy man. I've written a book. I've got the quote great American novel here, and they're like, no way. They're like, what else do you have? And I'm thinking, I don't have anything else. This was just the thing I did to relax. It was like I was developing a career.
You weren't looking for a career necessarily. Exactly.
And although the burning out thing was real, and the writing definitely relieved me. I was feeling, I loved writing. It was really refreshing me. Well, what wound up happening is we were able, over the next 2 years, up to 2010, write one more novel each of those 2 years part-time. And then they were really almost begging me, the demand here, we need you to write full-time. What can we do to get you to write full-time? And we need at least 2 books a year, which there's no way I could continue to be a pastor. So I'd hit the 25-year mark.
Right.
And there was a guy in the church, young man, that was pretty ambitious to take over the church. And it just seemed like the Lord had opened a door that just never opens. People don't get this kind of, opportunity to write. And I realized that. So it seemed like the Lord opened a wide door. And so we went ahead and walked through it. And that began this, 5-6 year relationship with my publisher, where I published a dozen more novels with them, all traditional. And they'd kind of decided when the second book came out, all the reviewers compared me to Nicholas Sparks. And so they kind of started branding me like the Nicholas Sparks of Christian fiction. And that was fine. I love writing those kind of books, but I also wanted to write other kinds of books. And every time I pitched those other kind of books, they said, "That's not your brand. You got to stay in your lane." And all the money they were spending on me was developing me with this brand. So meanwhile, of course, 2012, I guess, Amazon, like the big iceberg, we hit the iceberg, and Amazon just immediately began to demolish what was known as traditional publishing. And for the first time, lots of publishers were going belly up. Lots of them were merging. I had some really good friends, really bestseller, who just got dropped like a rock because their publishing firm just went bankrupt. So that didn't happen to me, but I was seeing that writing on the wall, that I should really consider this indie thing. And so I did a real deep dive into it in 2014. And rather than re-sign with my publisher, after 12 books, I decided to make the leap to becoming an indie in 2015, and started off with a book that they turned down flat because it was a suspense novel. And it's called One Like Tons.
Okay.
And that they were like, this is not people like suspense, but not from you, basically. You're the Nicholas Sparks.
Sure,
This is what they want from you. Turned out they were wrong.
Right.
And my reader loved it. And sales on the suspense book were pretty close to the Nicholas Sparks book. So what I did for the next several years, I would write one of the books that they were used to and one of the suspense books, until a few years later I had 2 4-book series, a Shelter Dog series and this suspense series. And the sale, I mean, also with just me and Amazon, I was making a lot more money. There wasn't so many hands in the pot.
Yeah.
And so,
right.
And plus I was getting to write the books I wanted. And there didn't seem to be any downside for me making the indie mark. Other than the one downside was I missed all the people. I developed some good friendship over the years, and I missed not being connected with them and seeing them at conferences and such. But other than that, I think the indie, experience for me has been very much more fulfilling.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. I love hearing the full story, because you really have run the gamut of what it used to be to what publishing is now. And I don't know that a lot of readers realize how much publishing has changed for writers over the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah,
it's been a ride.
It's almost like it was the same as it was for like a century. And all of a sudden in that, 5-year period, everything turned around. I mean, literally when my first conferences that I went to, I think they even called self-publishing like vanity publishing. And anybody that did it was just really looked down on. You just, there's no thought of that being a viable thing. Amazon, my first royalty statements, ebooks were only 3%. By 2015.
Oh, really?
Yeah, by 2015, when I left my publisher, they were more than half in just 5 years.
Yeah. That's crazy. I remember one of my first writers' conferences. It was the self-publishing concept was still, if you saw a self-published book, it was probably very poorly written. In other words, it's been turned down by every publisher, so that's the only option now, and it's poorly written. And now it's like I read so many indie books because they're so well done now, because writers have they're quality writers, there's quality editors, and quality books out there.
And there's also some duds. That's, I teach at writing conferences, and I'm often asked to teach about indie writing. And one of the biggest complaints when I teach the class is low sales and low reviews. And they're wondering why, how are you so successful? And one of the first questions I ask them is, show of hands, how many of you, before you uploaded your book, hired a decent editor and listened to what they said? And like 1 or 2 hands in a class of 30. And I know what the reason is. It's expensive, and when you're a publisher, the publisher provides the editorial service, but here you are as an indie, you have to pay somebody to do that.
Right.
And so everybody's like, well, I got some critique partners, and I've got this and that. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. It's vital that you spend the money, make the investment, and get with a good relationship, with a good editor, because virtually every traditional book you read, and these are the people that made the cut. These are supposed to be the cream of the crop that got in back then, and every single one of them were subjected to rigorous editing before their books were on the shelf. And here you are, turned down by these guys, over and over again, and you decide with a few critique partners your book's ready to go. And what it is, you're uploading a book that's full of problems that readers may not be able to say what they are. But generally what winds up happening is about halfway through they stop reading. And that's not a good thing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was first introduced to you with your first book. It came out, the Unfinished Gift. I think that was the first one of yours that I read. And I think I even read it around Christmas time, if I remember correctly. It was a good time to read it, right? It's kind of a Christmas novel, but it was fun because I remembered it gave me that let's be honest. I grew up where my Christmases were always transporting me back into like the 1940s because my grandparents were from that era. So all the Christmas music was the classic 1940s. All the traditions were really straight out of, the old fashioned. And I literally felt, and still feel to this day, like at Christmas time, I get in this little time machine and I'm somehow transported back to that era because that's, to me, I don't know why. Maybe it's because that's when Bing Crosby started coming out with the White Christmas movies, in the 50s, things like that. But that's Christmas. I do too. I love those.
White Christmas every year. You think I'd be like tired of it, but it's still like, I guess it's the nostalgia or something. It just sucks me back in. So yeah. So for me, writing that novel really was very fulfilling, and the sequel was equally fulfilling. And that's, I guess, in some ways what stirred me to the idea of writing romantic, novels with a romantic story. The Unfinished Gift had some romance, but it's really a reconciliation story. And then, like I said, with the romance, that became pretty normal. Even my suspense books, I have romance. I think I'm kind of a romantic guy, I guess, but for me, it's like it's not. I don't write what you would call romance novels. They just have just have a romantic, story as a part of the story. Because to me, that's part of what makes life wonderful. So yeah, and even in my the most recent book, that came out, The Perfect Stranger, it's I guess you call it romantic suspense. It's probably the genre.
Yeah. So tell us about The Perfect Stranger. I was looking at the book cover. First of all, it's really cool. Covers do sell books too. Let's just throw it out there. They say don't judge a book by the cover, and I'm like, that's the first thing I judge.
Not true at all. I don't know. Whoever said that, they weren't thinking of publishing, because publishers put a lot of time and money into covers. And I know for me, I've actually designed my own covers once I became indie. I had some background in graphic art because of being a pastor and not having a lot of money. I had to learn that stuff. But anyways, yes, the story, that was actually a story that I wanted to write, and I actually created it when I was with Ravel. But they turned it down because it was Nicholas Sparks didn't write anything older than World War II, and this story was set in 1912, around the Titanic era. And they loved the story, but they said, again, not your brand. So here I was when I was looking at this. I remembered that book. I thought, well, I can write whatever I want now. And I really love that story. So I'm going to dig it out and take a chance that people won't be finding it too strange to read a book written by me set in 1912. And to my great, surprise, it is done really well. I mean, the response to it has been wonderful. In fact, I wasn't planning on writing a sequel, but because of the response to the first one, I'm feeling compelled to.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And that'll make your readers so happy because they have an author that's listening to their requests.
Almost every review and email says, when's the next one coming out? And so I'm
that's awesome.
I'm really excited now that we've gotten the story. My wife and I worked on the second novel storyline, and we'll develop it. So now I'm pretty excited. I've got like 5 chapters written, and really think it's gonna be a good addition. I don't know if there'll be 4 books, to this, or if it'll just be, 2 books. But.
Right. Yeah. That's it's always fun to continue on with characters and sub-characters and all that. So tell us a little bit about The Perfect Stranger, so readers who are listening can hear about your latest and greatest release.
It's set, like I said, in 1912. The backdrop would be I thought if people can think of the movie Titanic, they can see this. That's it's actually the month that the Titanic sails, and even not about the Titanic at all. It's set in New York City in 1912. But if you think of what everything was going on in the movie, that's the atmosphere, that's the class system, sort of kind of like the end of the, what they would call the Gilded Age era. And this book does involve a clash of cultures because it's a guy who's basically grown up poor in San Francisco, dirt poor, makes his way to New York, and through his own, efforts becomes a successful businessman. and he's going to church. He meets this girl. He really falls in love with her, but she's way out of his league, kind of like Titanic. He's not as poor as Jack in the type movie, but he definitely, as far as in that era, it's like people they really want. It's almost arranged marriages still. You certainly had to marry somebody in your class,
right?
And for him, so it really was because of the father taking an interest in this guy that his daughter fell in love with, and really getting to know him, that he felt like, I really like this guy. I really think he's legit, and I'm going to take the flak to let my daughter court him, even though everybody's telling me you're crazy. And of course, something that gets introduced at the end of chapter 1 that makes her, Lily, and really everybody else later on wonder: what have we gotten into here? Is this guy a disaster? Is he a horrible person, and we're about to have a nightmare scenario? And so that's basically the plot. Is they're all set to go, blissful, looks like everything going on, and then something happens, like a wrench or stick gets stuck in the spokes, and the whole thing comes tumbling down. And that's all kind of like the end of chapter 1. So.
Wow. Oh, that's a lot in one chapter.
Yeah, I mean,
and then the story really begins.
The setup is all bliss and wonder, and you get a feeling, probably if you remember Downton Abbey or whatever, that's what it feels like until the thing happens that changes everything.
And I can't ask what the thing is, because that's going to spoil it, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm always I'm terrible. If you ask me once or twice, I might just jump right in and tell you. But
well, I won't ask you then. We'll leave that. We'll let that hang.
Anybody who wants can read the first few chapters on Amazon. There's that. You can click on it without buying the book, so you can find out. What the thing is, without buying the book. You just by reading the first few chapters, you'll get an idea of what's going on here, why. I guess what they call the inciting incident, or thing that just really sets the suspense going.
Yeah, that's awesome. So for readers who are exploring your books and kind of getting to know you, if they haven't already, what is how do you incorporate like your faith into your stories? Is it subtle and it's just kind of woven through? Is it really out there and bold, or how would you describe that?
I would say first of all, my belief is, and this is from being a pastor too, that I don't believe Christian fiction should be evangelical, or writing books to try to quote get folks saved. I don't think that people who are interested, most people are too hard-hearted, and if you give them a overtly Christian book and thinking that this is going to help them come to Christ, as soon as they find out it's religious, they shut the book. And so I was really thinking, no, the people who are going to come to Christ are the ones, like Jesus said, no one comes to me unless the Father who sent me draws him. And there's people who are being drawn by God and the Holy Spirit to the Lord. Those people, if they read my books, I think would be experiencing a real tug and a pull towards faith. Some of my books there's a strong message stuff going on because it works for the story. And other of them is more the suspense books are more I would call worldview. Where what I set out to do is I wanted to create really exciting suspenseful stories, just like you would have in secular. But my thought was, what if you took a credible believer or a couple of believers and set them in the middle of this really crazy, suspenseful story? How would they react versus how the protagonist in secular stories, and that was my premise. I wanted to show my thinking is, in my suspense novels, they're already believers and they're working through all these things like believers might. The other ones, there's going to be there could be people who are being drawn to Christ, and there could be moments when the gospel is shared. But if so, it would be very organic. It'd be very much in keeping with what's happening in the story. Just like in life, if you have somebody that you're talking to and you can see a green light to share the gospel, you start sharing. And if they start hardening up and stiffening up, you put back off. And that's how I do my writing.
Right.
Because I feel like there's so many books they can read about Christian living and whatever, evangelical, how to get saved, and
Mm-hmm.
all the preachers preaching in
Right.
church. They don't really want to. I don't think most people read fiction for that. So I'm really thinking the
Yeah.
overall majority
Yeah.
of my readers are already believers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, and I think that's so true. I mean, I find that I'll read fiction and I often will come away maybe with a new thought or a new idea or a new challenge for my faith. Or perhaps it's just encouraging my faith. But yeah, if I'm going to like actually learn something or really dig into something, I'm going to usually go to a nonfiction source or something like that. So, but it is nice also though to have fiction that does incorporate faith organically into
Yeah.
it, and look through a worldview that I'm familiar with
Yeah, and even
also.
when I became an indie, I didn't like, oh, now I can do right. There's still no profanity. There's no bedroom scenes. I'm
Hmm.
still,
Yeah.
I'm writing so that the same audience I had is not in any way shocked by anything they read. Um,
Yeah.
and I do think I get a lot of people who write me and say, certainly with certain books more than others, that, they really help them spiritually. Uh, because
Hmm.
again, these are like
Yeah.
credible believers going through difficult times, and I make the difficult times realistic.
Right.
And then how God
Right.
intervenes is often how God intervenes realistically. So there is some, I can say
Hmm.
spiritual encouragement happening in the midst of the story, but it's really more to me, the story is the thing. I'm not really starting with a message I'm trying to
Okay.
push.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You're starting with the story and the message can
Yeah,
kind
and I'm
of
looking like you would,
weave its way
like a
through
believer
if
would.
it's appropriate.
I'm looking for open doors for the faith
Yeah.
to find its way in. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So out of the books that you've written, do you have any that are like specifically that you're like, yeah, that's got to be on my top favorite of the ones I've written?
well, two of them are being made into movies, so I think those are probably The
Oh,
Unfinished Gift is being made into a movie, and also The Reunion. If you saw the movie
I did not
Reagan,
know that.
yeah, if you saw
Congrats.
the movie Reagan that came out recently, the executive producers of that
Uh-huh.
bought the rights to Reunion and are intending to. I've been in communication with them recently, and they absolutely love the Reunion, and they're committed to making it into a movie. And that maybe it might be a year or two
Wow.
because it's a fairly big. They do big projects. My son is actually making movies.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
got a production team, and they're actually developing The Unfinished Gift. They're at the stage where the script is written, money is raised. They're beginning to send the script out to actors and agents. They're hoping, if they're willing,
That's
they might actually
awesome.
start shooting by the end of the summer. So yeah,
Okay.
so those two
All right.
clearly. I have others that if you say fan favorites, you can kind of judge by the reviews. Like Rescuing Finley has over 5,000 5-star reviews, so that would be one that people
Yeah.
love.
Yeah.
The Discovery, that's another huge fan favorite. The Deepest Waters would be one that people really, really love. And
Hmm.
if you like suspense, I think starting with When Night Comes, uh, that'll give you a good flavor for
Okay.
how I write suspense. And that one's only, I think, $1.99. So
Yeah. Oh, there you go. That works. Awesome. Well, you have such a variety of books for people to choose from. Um, I know that a lot of listeners who listen to this podcast are always looking for books that suit like the older, like the I can't talk, high school age and up. And do you think some of these, I mean, I know you don't write YA specifically, but would these books be good? Like if parents are looking for ones for their sons or daughters to dive into good fiction that's solid, do you think these would be interesting for that age group too?
I would say so. I mean, obviously, when I write them, I'm not
Okay.
thinking of a young adult, but I always have people tell
Right.
me, I'm giving these books to my kids or my grandkids, and they love them.
Okay.
And there's
Yeah.
nothing, absolutely anything that they're going to read that would in any way, uh, uh, you know, it wouldn't hurt their faith journey at all. If anything, it would help it.
Yeah.
But the most thing is
Yeah.
I think they
Awesome.
like hopefully like the adults get sucked in, and at the end they're like that was a great read.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's good because I'm always like, I have not authors. I have parents ask me all the time, like, I'm looking for authors that my kids can pick up and read as they're graduating into adulthood that are good
my
novels
grandson's
for them. And a lot
I'm
of times
thinking
I
of,
get
I'm definitely going to give him a copy of Unfinished Gift. I think he'd love it.
okay, yeah. Yeah, awesome. Well, that's good to know. Cool. So what else, is there anything else that you really want to share today that you really want your readers or potential readers to know about you and your books?
Well, we covered a lot.
We did.
Well, I would just say, be aware when you read my books. There are, like you said,
Mhm.
there's not one genre. I Some people think I probably
Right.
write in like three. What's there's I think maybe my style of writing is the same though. And if you like any of my books,
Sure.
you'll probably like all of my books because even this, like I said, the people who read the suspense books, some of them said that's the first suspense book I've ever read, and I read it because I love all your other books. And then I completely realized it's still you, and it is very different because the suspense is all about the story and the pace and the but so I feel like if they start to pick one of my books and start to read it, if they like it, there's a good chance
Hmm.
they'll like the others. And in terms of
Right.
my message, obviously would just be I do think that people it would be more probably to writers in some ways. Uh, I'm really
Hmm.
advocating that the whole, I guess you say, the industry that's what we know as indie fiction really up the game.
Right.
Uh, there's far too many people I talk to who like yeah they read a book and get halfway through it's got a great start and then it gets deep in the weeds and they stop reading. And I really want to see the quality of the indie fiction writing rise to what traditional writing is. And I really think that would
Right.
I always push this, but really make sure if you're a writer, indie writer, that you're going to take the time to hire a good editor and listen to what they say before you upload that thing to Amazon,
Hmm.
and that'll make all the difference in the world. I think in terms of whether you grow a readership or whether they, you know, stop reading halfway through.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Dan, this is great. It's been so fun to have you here. If readers want to get a full roster of all your books and titles, what's the best way for them to find you and kind of get to know your library?
Well, if you go on Amazon and just type in Dan Walsh books, they've created a
Hmm.
author page with all of my books in one place. And that, of course, my
Great.
website, I've done the same thing. But all of my
Hmm.
website book pages refer you back to Amazon. I don't sell books on my website. My website will give you a
Okay.
chance to,
All
like,
right.
to sign up for the newsletter. We'd stay more in touch with me. And I'm also on Facebook.
Hmm.
Probably on Facebook every day. So if people find me on Facebook,
Awesome.
uh, you know, I
All
go to the
right.
other social media platforms, but I'm on Facebook every day.
All right. All right. That sounds great. Well, Dan, this has been so much fun having you. I've loved being a reader, and I've got more to catch up on because I can definitely say I've not read them all. But it's been a blast having you on today, and thank you so much for your
Oh, I
time.
enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having me, Jaime.
And that's a wrap for today here at Madlet Musings. I hope you join us again. And if you want to, be sure you like and subscribe here at your favorite podcast player or on YouTube, because you won't want to miss all the wonderful alerts that let you know when we have another conversation for you to eavesdrop on.